Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Do you ever feel like you're doing the journey alone? Have you ever felt like that you just need someone to talk to, someone who could bring some perspective into your world? Or maybe you're not the type of person who learns from watching video courses or reading books, and you just want to talk with someone specifically about your challenges and how to break through them. I want to introduce you to the High Performance Men's Coaching Program. It's an intensive coaching experience designed to unlock a man's full potential in his life, business, and relationships. Over this past year, I've brought together and trained some of the best coaches in the world to help men step up, stop playing small, and become the strongest versions of themselves. Learn more about High Performance Men's Coaching at kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. You are not alone, and we are here to cut through the crap, hold you accountable, and challenge you so that you can make your dreams become a reality. Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Frank Ostaseski, an internationally respected Buddhist teacher and co-founder of the Zen Hospice Project and founder of the Metta Institute. He's lectured at Harvard Medical School, the Mayo Clinic. He's been highlighted on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He's been honored by the Dalai Lama for his work, and he is the author of the 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. Frank, welcome to the show.
Nice to be with you, Andrew. Really happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're here. I have a lot of questions for you, Frank. Let's get started with a quote that you live by that's helped you on your journey.
Oh, well, one of my favorites is attributed to Nelson Mandela. He said, it always seems impossible until it's done. It always seems impossible until it's done. You know, I worked with a lot of folks who were dying, and some of them were trying to meet a situation that they thought was impossible, unbearable. But they found within themselves the resources, the capacity to meet the impossible in extraordinary ways.
Mm-hmm. And the impossible meaning death.
Well, the impossible in their case meaning death, but I think the impossible might be different for each of us. Yeah, it always seems impossible until it's done.
Right.
Then it's not so impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when Roger Bannister ran that 4-minute mile many decades ago. As soon as he did it, the very next week we had high school students beating that 4-minute mile.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't know it could be done until it's done. Yeah. Okay, your work here, I'm very intrigued. You've done a great deal of work around the topic of death. And I think we look at death as something that can scare us, something that is, it's obviously the thing that we do not want to have happen in our lives or to anyone close to us. It's a very painful and tragic experience. Last year, I had 3 family members pass away, and it was almost, in a period of just 6 months. And it was I learned a lot about what was important to me during that time frame. I'm curious, what got you started with working around death?
Well, it's a long and meandering road, right? But in my case, my own parents died when I was really young. So I got familiar with death very early on. I was 16 when my mom died, and a few years later, my dad died. So I was out on my own really quickly, and I had to come face to face with this dimension of our life, the fact that we all die. So that was a big factor. I worked in refugee camps in southern Mexico and Central America, where I saw a lot of horrible dying. When I came back in the early 80s, the AIDS epidemic was just hitting San Francisco. We had 30,000 people die in San Francisco, 30,000 people. We forget how devastating that was. So we had a lot of friends who were looking after and taking care of. None of us knew what we were doing. We were sort of making it up as we went along. And it was out of that I started the Zen Hospice Project. Yeah. I think that, when we started Zen Hospice, honestly, Andrew, we didn't know what we were doing. We just thought there was a natural match between people who were cultivating what we might call the listening mind or the listening heart in meditation practice and people who needed to be heard at least once in their lives, folks who were dying. In our case, They were folks who were living on the streets of San Francisco on park benches behind City Hall and in single room occupancy hotels. And those folks, they really showed me what's important. Yeah.
What were some of the biggest regrets that you found amongst those that were dying?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that we often go to that. We go to regrets and we want to know what those regrets are so we can avoid them. And that's reasonable, of course. But I'm always more interested in knowing, what did people discover there that we ought to know to live our lives? Not just what should we avoid, but what did we discover? And one of the things that they discovered was that, first of all, without a reminder of death, we tend to take life for granted, and often becoming lost in endless pursuits of self-gratification, But when we keep death at our fingertips, really close at hand, it reminds us not to hold on too tightly, Maybe we don't take ourselves or our ideas so seriously, We let go a little more easily. We recognize that death comes to everyone. And we appreciate that we're all in the same boat together. And I think this helps us to be a bit kinder and gentler with one another. Yeah. So having an awareness of death in the middle of life.
How can we use it to live more fully? Hence the subtitle of your book, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully.
I think that we can harness, we could say, the awareness of death to appreciate the fact that we're alive. That's what you were saying a moment ago, right? To really encourage us to explore, clarify our values, to find meaning, to generate positive action, to do the things in life that really matter to us, right? It's the impermanence of life that gives us perspective. Yeah. As we come into contact with the precarious nature of this life, we also come to see how precious it is. And then we don't want to waste a minute, right? Then we want to enter our lives fully and use it in a responsible way. So I think death is a good companion on the road to living well and dying without regret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is the ultimate wake-up call. Why does man shift away from doing the things that really matter in his life? Why does it take death to be our biggest slap in the face?
Yeah. Well, hopefully it doesn't. I think that's changing in our culture, and hope we don't wait until the time of our deathbeds to do what really matters, to tell people that we love them, for example. So I want to just come back to this piece about the fact that everything's always coming and going. It's not just happening at the end of our life. It's not just happening at the end of a long road. Everything is constantly coming together and falling apart. So, like in Japan in the spring, there's these beautiful cherry blossoms that cover the mountainsides. They're so fragile and beautiful, right? Or this place I teach up in Idaho, there's these little flax flowers that came out for one day. One day. They're beautiful, right? How come those are so much more beautiful than plastic flowers? Right? Which last forever, right? Isn't it their brevity that in a way shows us their beauty and really reveals to us, again, to the idea that we ought to step in completely, really, really appreciate this life, yeah? It's the passing of things that actually gives life its beauty.
It gives us the beauty. And I feel that there's so many lessons about, because it is passing, like for instance, that flower, I'm sure people go out of their way to go see that flower because it's going to pass. It's going to go away. And so in our own lives, it's almost like we are going to pass. That is one thing that we know for certain, is that you have been given this life and that you will also pass at some point. And while we're here, like that is the flower, being alive. Like we have this moment to enjoy it and get the most out of it while we're here.
Yeah. I think I mean, but it's like even more simply, look, we rely on impermanence. We rely on constant change. I mean, that really boring dinner party you're going to go to on Saturday night, it's going to come to an end, right? And trees that are going to fall in the forest, and evil dictatorships are going to be replaced, hopefully, with thriving democracies. So it's not just, again, this saber of death hanging over our head. We can ask ourselves, how do we meet endings in our life? Like when you leave a party, do you ghost out or do you actually say goodbye to everybody? When you're meeting an ending in your life, do you go unconscious around them or do you meet them directly and completely? The end of a meal, the end of a breath, the end of a day. How do you meet those endings? I think that's one of the things that death can remind us of. Not just, again, how do we prepare for this thing after a long illness or some such thing? How do we meet endings? Are we anxious about them? Are we indifferent about them? Do we isolate ourselves when we're coming close to an ending? How do we meet that? Yeah.
Even the end of a trip, the end of a vacation. Yeah. It's like that last day. It's like, oh, it's ending. It was so much fun. Or sometimes you're excited to go home too. But what do you recommend us to do to meet those endings?
Yeah, well, I recommend that you enter them. That on that last day of vacation that you just described, that you're actually there for it. You're not spending your time packing to go home, or, upset that you have to end this beautiful stay on the island of Kauai or something, right? So enter it, really enter it, and really see it. Boy, this water is more beautiful today because it's the last day, Maybe it's what didn't I get to do, and so I go and do that activity. But I think it's more about appreciating, like what does this, how can I enter into this more immediately, more directly? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think a part of that too would be having to be present rather than thinking about things in the past or thinking about the future, but to really snap into the present so that you can appreciate what is right in front of you that is coming to an end.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that dying shows me about that is that, I've been present at the death of a couple of thousand people. And I'm not romantic about dying. It's the hardest work you'll ever do, and it doesn't always turn out well. It's cruel and it's messy and it's beautiful and it's sometimes mysterious and transformative. But most of all, in a way, it's normal. It's ordinary. We all go through it. None of us get out of here alive, right? So one of the things that I think it can show us is like, don't miss it. Don't miss it. Don't wait for some other time. Waiting for the next moment to arrive. We missed this one.
Yeah.
And so I want to, I can't tell you how many times I've been with family members who've said, when will mom die? And waiting for the moment of her death, they miss all the moments in between. Yeah. So I think one of the things that death shows us is don't wait, don't wait. When folks are dying, it's easy for them to recognize that every minute, every breath counts.
Yes.
But the truth is death is always with us. It's integral to life. Everything is constantly changing. Nothing's permanent. And this idea can both frighten us, but it can also inspire us.
Mm-hmm. Are you saying that you don't? We were talking earlier, but you don't have to be dying to die.
I hope not. And I hope we don't have to wait until the end of our life to find out what it's about. I think that a lot of people get to an ripe old age, 80, 90 years old, and have never lived their life. They've lived, an unlived life, right? And there are some people I know who died at 20 years old and lived their life like a hot fire,
right?
Fully and completely. They have it's not only that they don't have any regrets, they stepped in really fully to their lives. So the fact that we will die doesn't make us live a full life. Using the wisdom of that knowing, that we're going to die, that's what gets our attention and says, okay, what's important then? How do I step in?
Yeah. Why do we wait? You said, don't miss it. Don't wait. Why do we wait when we hear this? But let's say a month can go by, and or even 3 hours after listening to this, someone might be driving and they're really engaged in this, and they're like, I'm going to live. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to go for it. And then we get right back into life. And why would we wait?
Yeah, good question. Great question. And I don't know all the answers to that, of course, but I would say in my own life, I would say habit has a very strong momentum, right? And it carries right through even until the time of our dying, our habits, right? So the question that arises is, what habits do I want to create now, right? What are the ones I really want to generate and cultivate and that will cause me to engage with life rather than stepping back in procrastination, and worry and anxiety and wondering if we're making the right decision. I think the fact that things are constantly changing encourages us to actually take more risks. When we recognize that the nature of reality and our nature are not terribly different, then the fact that things are uncertain and not fixed, this becomes a liberating opportunity rather than a threat.
What does it mean to live fully?
Well, one of the invitations in my book of the 5 invitations is welcome everything, push away nothing. Welcome everything, push away nothing. Now, that sounds great. It would make a great bumper sticker, but how do we do that?
Right.
So to welcome everything, we don't have to like what's arising. It's not really our job to approve or disapprove. The word welcome sort of confronts us. It asks us to suspend our usual rush to judgment and to simply be open to what's happening. So our task, in a way, is to give our attention fully and completely to what's at our front door, right? To what's right here, right now. That doesn't mean that we don't make plans for the future. Of course we do. But we hold them lightly, So to welcome everything and push away nothing means that we don't exactly know what's going to wake us up in life. And so we pay attention to everything that comes along. You know, the great African-American writer, James Baldwin, he said, look, there are a lot of things in life that we must face that we cannot change. But we cannot change anything unless we're willing to face it, right? Mm-hmm. So this idea of welcome everything, it's a kind of cultivation of what we might call a fearless receptivity. Yeah. And this can't be done as just an act of will. It's not just a force. Uh-huh. It's an act of love, actually. It's an act of love to be able to welcome everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Even the bad.
Yeah, even the bad. You know, look, I work with people who are in terrible conditions. I work with people that before they got an illness, they had terrible conditions. You know, they lived on the street or, you know, in a single room occupancy hotel. They were addicted. They had, you know, mental health problems. And then on top of that, they got a life-threatening diagnosis. Mm-hmm. You know? Uh-huh. And what I saw in those things, and I'm not Pollyanna about dying, not at all, you know. But what I saw was that these folks who had no inner life, they hadn't gone to a workshop, you know, they didn't know how to meditate. They found within themselves the resources, the strength, the courage, the capacity to meet unbelievably difficult circumstances. And oftentimes they opened in a way, had them really transform their life. It really changed the way in which their life was going. Now, you might say, too late. And I would agree with you. I think it is too late to wait until the final moments of our life to have that discovery. But here's the truth. If that opportunity is there at the time of our dying, then it's here now, right? And we can turn toward it now. We can do it now. I mean, to imagine that at the time of your dying, you're going to have the physical strength, the emotional stability, the mental clarity to do the work of a lifetime. This is a ridiculous gamble. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not what I recommend you take.
Yeah. And so the 5 invitations in the book. So you've been talking about don't wait, like don't miss it. I really like that. Welcome everything, push away nothing.
Yeah.
The next one you have here is bring your whole self to the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, we're often hiding some part of ourselves. You know, we all like to look good, right? We want to seem smart and capable and intelligent and, you know, well-adjusted. We like to put forward a good self-image, right? But, you know, few of us really want to be known for our helplessness or our anger or our ignorance. Right. But the truth is, when we're in relationship, these things are meeting places with other people. I mean, here's an example. I was taking care of a friend of mine. He was dying of AIDS some years ago. And I arrived at his house, and he was, in one morning, Andrew, in one morning, he lost his ability to stand, to hold a fork, or to speak in any intelligent way. Right? Uh-huh. Everything that came out of his mouth was gobbledygook. And it was my day to take care of him. And so I did through the course of the day and into the night. And it was really hard work. He had these anal tumors and he had constant diarrhea. And so we moved from the toilet to the tub back and forth, you know, dozens and dozens of times. And I was so tired, you know, I just wanted him to go to bed and wake up in the morning and somehow this nightmare be over.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm washing my hands at the kitchen sink. He's sitting on the toilet and he's whispering something to me that I can't understand. So I turn toward him and he says to me, "You are trying too hard." And I was trying too hard to be somebody. Me, Mr. Hospice, me, Mr. Death, you know, using all my expertise. And I sat down on the bathroom floor next to him and I just cried. And while that moment between us was the most tender and the most intimate of our whole friendship. And you see what happened in that moment was that I was willing to go into the territory where he was. He was living in this territory of helplessness. But I was afraid to go there. I was afraid if I went there, we'd both get stuck and I couldn't be of any use. Oh. But it didn't happen. You know, I went into that territory with him. I understood something about it. And then the situation showed us what to do next. Uh-huh. And we could. But so I was afraid in the beginning to show my helplessness. But in fact, that was the meeting place for us. That's how I built an empathetic bridge to his situation. That's how I learned what actually would be of value and service here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. We very rarely let ourselves feel vulnerable, right? We mostly feel our defenses against vulnerability, you know, our protections. Yeah. But when we feel vulnerable, you know, it actually just feels open. It's like it's as if the world can impress itself on us, right? When we're vulnerable, we become more porous in a way. And so the beauty of life, even the horror of life, can impress itself on our consciousness, on our psyche. Yeah. Uh-huh. And then that's how we learn. We learn directly and immediately. Yeah. We don't, you know, like think about your life, right? You're a bright guy and you have tremendous capacity, but you probably didn't get where you are because you had a strategic plan. Some of it came about through your intuition, right? Through your just feeling your way along.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's how it is with all of us. And that's how it is with most of the big things in our life. We make a plan. That's good. That's important. But, then we sort of adjust, right, to the circumstance we find ourselves in. And we bring our whole self. We bring all our knowledge and expertise, but we also bring our willingness to discover and our ignorance and our, willingness to not know, right? That's part of what we bring to those situations, and it shows us. It reveals itself to us. Life reveals itself to us.
Yeah.
And then we go forward. Yeah.
It feels more human rather than trying to be perfect.
Yeah. Right. That's a really good way to say it. So when we say whole self, we often, we're just putting our best self forward, our shiniest, brightest self, right? And that's good. That's okay. But if we're going to be really whole, then we have to accept all parts of ourselves. We need to include all the conflicting qualities of our life, the incongruities of our life. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. Wholeness means no part of you is left out.
Yeah. Because I think when you say whole, it might sound like bring your whole, like your best self, but really you have imperfections and flaws and challenges and dark things maybe that you don't want to share, but that is the whole self, right? Rather than just bringing the significant, the positive and the successful stuff.
Beautiful. And you didn't get those positive and successful things. You didn't make your biggest changes in your comfort zones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we get nudged and shaped by the challenges of our life, by the difficulties actually of our life. That's where we learn, really. Very few of us just learn in some kind of lotus realm, some kind of comfort zone.
Right.
So bringing your whole self means you bring all those things along, also. All those parts of you and those times in which you've been challenged, you bring that forward too.
Yeah. If you don't, what would happen? If you don't bring your whole self to the experience?
You live half a life.
Okay.
I think you live half a life. I think you have a very safe life, but very narrow, very limited, very circumscribed, without much growth or transformation or, for that matter, joy. Joy, I mean, excuse me for going off on this, but if you're going to a mountain lake, right, and you love to hike, you like to go up into the mountains. So if you're going to make that hike, you got to love the lake, right? But it's not enough just to love the lake. You got to love the walk up the mountain, because otherwise when the mosquitoes come out, you're going to turn back, right? So love is the fuel for the journey, I would say. That's my one-liner. But joy is the spark that ignites that fuel, right? And one of the ways that joy shows up in my life, and probably yours too, is as curiosity, as a willingness to discover, right? And it has a playful quality. It's delightful, to live your life that way. I mean, look at little kids play. They don't play for a purpose. They play just to enjoy themselves. And so I think we sometimes lose contact with that kind of simplicity. And it's not to turn ourselves into children or become naive, but how do we hold on to that and cultivate that quality of curiosity, that sense of wonder, awe-inspiring quality, That for me, that's really important. And so to bring my whole self is to bring that forward as well.
Do you think it's possible that one can live a full, happy life inside of their comfort zones?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose, I didn't used to believe anything. Now I believe everything's possible. But, so I suppose it's possible, but I don't think it's highly likely. I think that we stay in our comfort zones. It's usually about sort of protection, our comfort zones. They're often about, keeping the status quo, not rocking the boat. And I don't think, we accomplish great things in life by staying safe.
Yeah.
And I don't mean you should be reckless. I'm not suggesting everyone should go jump out of airplanes, although that is kind of a fun thing to do. I've done that. But
Great.
What I suggest is that you inquire, that you really be willing to look and see. That there's this slogan, right, that you've heard a lot of times: the obstacles are the path. So what I would say is that happiness that we all are searching for, it's right there. But what we have to look and see is what's blocking it. What's obscuring it? What's preventing us from seeing it? Actually. And usually it's some story we have about ourselves and our capacity or what we're not willing to risk, etc. But when we approach the obstacle and get to know it really well, it's going to knock on the door of it. But then I think what happens is we enter, we learn something about this thing that was kind of just a big, scary monster in the closet. And we get familiar with it and it's not so scary anymore.
Yeah. So people who want to stay safe, it's rooted in survival. Is that the core there?
Probably. I mean, that's one of our things, one of the three instincts, survival, sexual, social, those three driving forces in our life. But another way to think about this is safe enough to risk, like, for example, when you get into a relationship, at first, you're putting your best self forward and, trying to be shiny and all that, and then you start to feel some more comfort with the person you're with, right? And you start to feel safe enough to take a risk, to share something else, let's say, or to speak to something that maybe before you would have been more resistant to talk about. So you get safe enough to risk. You start having enough confidence in reality, one could say, or confidence in your capacity to meet reality, that you rely on that. And that becomes your default rather than your protective devices. Your confidence, your faith, if you will, starts to become your, the source of your capacity to move forward in a way. Mm-hmm. And that's what people discover in around the time of their dying. Look, when people are dying, they lose everything. It's not just, they lose their home and they lose their job in all the ways that they've defined themselves. Right. I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm whatever. And then we get down to something much more fundamental and essential, we could say. Who are you without all those things? You're still there, right? And I think we start to discover is we start to see that, this basis of who I am, my own innate goodness, my basic trust in life, this has always been there, and I can rely on it. I can really rely on it. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that we start to trust enough to take risks.
So people want to stay safe because it's rooted in survival, which is death. Like, I want to stay safe, and then you could skip survival. I want to stay safe so that I could stay alive, so I don't die, so I can keep living.
And that makes sense. But then what happens is, we start shrinking down what it means to live in order to stay safe. And pretty soon, we're living behind a little white picket fence or in some very small container of our life, some idea of our life that isn't really fully living.
Yeah. And so I think a powerful question here is, what do we really have to be scared of when we know with certainty that the worst thing is already going to happen?
Yeah. I think it's not my view that we're going to get rid of all our fears. I'm old now, and I'm in my 60s, and I've been to therapy, and I've done psychedelics, and I've done meditation. I haven't gotten rid of one single neuroses in all my life, but they don't define me in quite the same way anymore, right? So when I'm afraid now, I know I'm afraid, but I also know it's not the only thing in the room. Like when you're afraid, right? There's a part of you that's not afraid, and you can orient to that part that's not afraid. That's the fearlessness. It's not that we chase away fear, or that we don't have any fears, or we get over all our fears, or we overcome them. What we start to see is fear is part of my human experience, but it doesn't have to define me. It doesn't have to be all that I am. And so we cultivate our capacity to be with that fear, to not be swept away by it. I think that's where mindfulness practice can come in, or other practices where we are of inquiry, where we take a look at our life. So we often think or speak in terms of overcoming, like recently, John McCain, the senator, right, got diagnosed with glioblastoma cancer. Now it's 100% fatal in almost every, it's 99% fatal.
Okay.
Right. All the media, all the people started responding to John McCain, who was a war hero, saying, if anybody can beat this cancer, it's John McCain. That's great, but he's probably not going to beat it. The cancer's going to win. Now, suppose instead we said, John McCain is a graceful guy. He's a courageous guy. And I think he's going to find the courage and the grace to meet this with some degree of dignity. Now, that's a really different relationship to that experience. It's not a false hope. Right? So I think it's the same thing as with our survival. We know that if we are born, we're going to die. It's a package deal, right? Nobody gets out of here alive. So now, given that, how do we want to live our life? Like that vase that you got from your mother that sits on the shelf in your living room is going to fall off that shelf one day and break, right? You know that. It's going to happen. So the question is, how do you take care of the vase now? You can wrap it up in, bubble wrap and keep it in your storage closet and never enjoy it. Or you can have it on the shelf and you can admire it and you can enjoy it and it reminds you of your mother, and that's great. And so you live with it. knowing that it's going to fall off the shelf one day. And it's like that about the rest of our lives, This is going to happen. This is not a maybe. It's going to happen. So given that we're going to die, how do we want to live our life?
Just taking it, this is I think the most powerful topic there is to discuss. So it takes a minute to really let this conversation set in. I was reading a book about death. I believe it was Michael Singer. But he has this topic where he says everything that you did today, someone was once doing before they died. So perhaps driving a car. There's been many people who have passed away driving a car unexpectedly, taking a shower. Most of us today, I hope, took a shower today. And people have died taking a shower. Just things have happened. Walking downstairs, people have slipped and fell. Things that sitting here on your computer, people have had heart attacks or aneurysms, and they did not know that was going to be the next thing, that it was unexpected. And it really makes this moment right here, knowing that thousands, potentially millions of people have died doing exactly what you're doing right now. Nothing dangerous, not jumping out of a building or in a battlefield, but that it's very unexpected. And I shared with you earlier, I think the most mind-boggling thing for me about death is that you don't know when it's going to happen, and that you're not guaranteed to live the full length of how long humans can live, which I believe is around the 80-year mark or so. And obviously there are some who live longer, but the average. And so I think people assume that, okay, death is happening over there, like it's a timeline, and I'm here, which means I can subtract where I am now to the average, length of human life. And then this is the rest. I get all of this. This is all mine. Yeah. But it's not yours.
Not really. It's kind of rented, isn't it?
It's rented, and it can be taken.
Or another way to say it is we gracefully go. Like we were saying about identities before. All the ways I've defined myself are either stripped away by illness or they're gracefully given up, but they all go. So I have a choice there about how do I spend my life in resistance and struggle, or do I have some degree of grace about it? The people I worked with lived on the streets of San Francisco. They lived in terrible conditions, rat-infested hotels and park benches. They were alcoholics, and they were prostitutes, and they were homeless folks that survived on the margins of society. And some of them were from these cultures that I didn't know, speaking languages I couldn't understand. Yeah, like there was this guy, Nguyen. He was a Vietnamese man, and he was really scared of ghosts. And his roommate was this guy, Isaiah, an African-American man who was very comforted by visits from his dead mother. Yeah. There was a man I worked with who was a hemophiliac, and he contracted the HIV disease from a blood transfusion. But the year before, he had disowned his gay son because he had AIDS, right? And now the father and the son were in twin beds in the same room, being cared for by Agnes, the son's mother and the father's wife. Yeah. I work with people who died really young, and they'd hardly begun to live their lives. And then there was this woman, Elizabeth, that I worked with, who was 93 years old. And she said to me, "Why has death come for me so soon?" So I think that what I'm trying to get at, it isn't just about the conditions of our life. In a way, we live beyond those conditions. They don't completely define us. Yeah. And it's not a matter of getting all the conditions lined up just right, and then life is good. That's usually how we do it. We imagine that if I get everything just square exactly the way I want it, it'll be fine. But conditions are always changing. And so if we depend on them for our happiness, them alone for our happiness, we're out of luck.
What do you tell them when they ask you those questions that they're kind of unexplainable? How do you meet that? How do you answer those?
Yeah, well, I don't have any, I've given up my days of giving advice to people because, advice is cheap and it doesn't always help. So I enter into a kind of conversation with them. I try and find out from them what matters, in their life right now, not what mattered when they were 20 or 30, but what matters right now in their life. And that's the most important thing, because the only place we can make change, the only place we can heal, the only place we can really live our life is here and now, right? So we explore that. We find out what's stopping them from, stepping, as we've been saying, stepping fully into your life or living their lives completely right now, right here and now. Yeah, that's the first thing that we look at. And then, inevitably we encounter the roadblocks, the things that are in the way of that. There was a guy I worked with. I met him in a psychiatric unit. He was there because he tried to take his life, and he tried to take his life because he had terminal cancer and he couldn't imagine a life with any dignity. So I met him in the psychiatric unit in this very stark environment, and he was turned toward the wall in withdrawal and depression. And I just sat there in the chair for a while because that's my way. I just sit in silence, And after a while, he turned over and he said, "Who are you? Nobody's ever sat this long in silence with me before." And I told him who I was, and I was from the Zen hospice. And he said, "Uh-huh." And I said to him, "Look, what do you want?" It was a really simple question, a crazy question maybe for a psychiatric unit. And he said, "Spaghetti." I said, "Really?" It was that simple, spaghetti. I said, "Okay, look, we make really good spaghetti at our house. Why don't you come to the hospice, stay there with us?" And, that was the end of the admissions interview. So he came, and then we had this big bowl of spaghetti waiting for him because you understand, spaghetti meant home and nurturance and familiarity, right? Mm-hmm. Now, he didn't stop wanting to kill himself just because we gave him spaghetti. It was good spaghetti, but it wasn't that good. So there was this book at the time that told you how to take your life if you have terminal illness. And so he wanted this book. I got it for him and I read a chapter every night with him because sometimes you have to go to the darkest places to find out what really heals. Yeah? Now, in the end, he didn't take his life. In fact, he said to me, "Frank, I'm happier now than I've ever been." And I said, "Oh, come on." I said, just a few weeks ago, you wanted to kill yourself because you couldn't walk in the park, He said, "Oh, that was just chasing desire." That was an amazing statement. That was just chasing desire. I said, "What do you mean? These activities aren't important to you anymore?" He said, "No, not now." He said, "Now my pleasure comes from the coolness of the breeze and the softness of the sheets." Now, I thought this was a remarkable turnaround for a guy I'd met in a psychiatric unit. What he was saying was, because I am here now, I am really present in this life. It's not about, all the bells and whistles and toys. It's about how do I bring my attention fully and completely to whatever it is I'm engaged in. And then whatever I'm engaged with becomes very alive. It becomes very satisfying. Yeah. Even if it's a really simple thing like the coolness of the breeze, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I think we're always trying to get and manage the conditions, but it's like trying to arrange deck chairs on the Titanic. You're missing the big picture when that's happening. It's like the ship's going down and you're busy, playing the fiddle. So like learn to actually step into this moment and be alive in it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah? And if you do that, if you meet what's true in this moment, more truth will reveal itself. It's not like there's one big truth at the end of life. You just start living your life with integrity.
In your experience, does death help people come back to the present moment?
Yeah, good question. That's a really great question. And the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, it has incredibly powerful force. I mean, the thing about death is that it's pretty hard to, when it's in the room, it's pretty hard to deny that it's actually there. Uh-huh. And yet we have great capacity for, protecting ourselves for denying things. And so it sometimes happens that, in fact, that's the case. People, leave skid marks dragging their heels to death, right? But mostly what happens is it gets your attention. It galvanizes our attention, thrusts us or pulls us right into the current moment. And then, again, we get to pay attention to and act on what really matters to us.
Man, so as you were talking, this is going to sound, you might be like, how does this come together? But I was playing the game Connect 4. Okay. Uh-huh. And when you're playing the game towards the end, there's all of the little circles are filled up. And then once the game is over, you slide the thing on the bottom and everything just falls. And what I was thinking of was like this analogy of like all those little circles are like, it's like your work, like, stress, in your relationship, or like, this didn't work out, or your finances or whatever. And then when the conversation of death comes up, it's like you slide that thing on the bottom and all those things fall. And what's left is emptiness. Like it's this empty space where you get to really replace and be very selective now with how many of those little circles those coins or whatever that you're going to put inside your life. But I was playing Connect 4 last night.
I know the game. It's a really great game, and it's a great image. What you're giving us. I mean, look, whatever we've done with our lives makes us who we are when we die, right? And everything, absolute everything, counts. Whatever we've done with our lives makes us who we are when we die, and everything, absolutely everything, counts, right? So it's a kind of encouragement to live our life with integrity, with purpose, with meaning, while at the same time not getting heavy-handed about it, not getting too, swept up in what we think will be the most important thing, but really paying attention, the small stuff, the when you look at your life, when you look back at your life, which people do, of course, when they're coming to the end, sometimes we look back critically, but mostly, people look back on their lives and they point to the things the small things that were really highlights, It wasn't that they spent more time in the office or they got a second Mercedes. Nobody's ever told me that. What they've asked is two questions, basically. Am I loved? And did I love well?
Wow.
Those are the two questions that, for the most part, in one fashion or another, I'm condensing them. People have asked me, am I loved? Did I love well?
That it's interesting because we can spend so much of our lives chasing these external things in society, and not to say that you shouldn't have those things like a nice car or house. Like you can, of course, do that, but I think we can get lost in that. And then when we find out if our time does come, what we really focus our attention on is not the amount of horsepower in the car, or the square footage of the house, or the way the kitchen counters looked after we remodeled it, or the girl who broke up with us in college. But right now, the relationships, am I loved? And did I love well? I think that's the one where, because you can be loved, but did you love them back well? And I think that's where there can be some question, some concern of, man, I was chasing the wrong things.
Right. So if we look at our life and we discover that, then what do? Do we beat ourselves up and say, "Oh, I screwed up," or do we? I think we just turn on a dime. I think we just say, "Oh, I don't want to waste any more time. I want to really," it's like, look, we gotta survive in this world, and it's helpful to be productive. And of course, we all want good conditions. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. Right?
Yeah.
But to imagine that just that will give you your happiness is an error. Yeah. Just having all the toys is not going to do it. Just having all the experiences is not going to do it. Yeah. We're tangled up in each other. We belong to each other. And when we start to appreciate that, I think that we're all in the boat together, so to speak. I think we start taking care of ourselves and each other in a really different way, I'm thinking about what's going on right now in the world, and even the natural disasters, and look what's happened. Look what happened with folks at Harvey. A lot of people, came out to help one another, And I think sometimes in these kinds of crises, we do that. We step up and we realize that we're in the soup together, And I think that's one of the things that folks who are dying have shown me, like we're in this together. It's our notion of American idealism, our idealistic notion of American individualism and our independence. That's great, but it's not effectively true. We are tangled up in each other. And I don't want to get too philosophical here about this, but when we start to see that your nature and my nature isn't fundamentally different, that we both are trying to be happy, that maybe we have different ways of going about it, but basically we both want to be happy, then I think we find our common ground with each other, and we stop arguing with each other so much, and we stop arguing with reality so much, and we relax, and we begin to really enjoy our lives. Yeah.
Have you ever encountered someone who was passing, but they were not shaken up by it? Instead, they had accepted their death peacefully and were in that bed in a state of happiness?
Absolutely. Yeah. Not just once, many times.
Okay.
And as I said, there's the opposite, of course. But, what's really been amazing to me is people who you wouldn't think that's what they would discover, Look, dying is inevitable, and it's also intimate. And I've seen people develop profound insights and engage in really powerful processes of transformation that help them to start to experience themselves as something bigger and larger than the small and separate self they took themselves to be. And these were not, this is not a fairy tale, and it's not a romantic idea of dying, it's not a happy ending that contradicts all the other suffering that was there before.
Yeah.
I think it's common that people regularly discover a capacity to meet their final days and months with some degree of surrender, acceptance, ease, not so much fear. Yeah.
Not so much fear. So I'm taking notes as we've been talking, and what I'm going to say this statement, and I want to hear your response to this. So if death helps us come to the present moment, if it does help us there, and if present moment is where we fully come alive, then if we remove the present moment part, we could almost say death helps you become fully alive.
Yeah. I mean, and we don't have to wait until the time of our dying to get that message. We don't have to wait until the time of our dying to rest in peace, right? We can rest in it right now. We don't have to wait until the time of our dying to be free of struggle. Yeah, we can do that now. And so what I'm encouraging us, my book is not about how do you take care of dying people. It's about what do you learn there at the precipice of death that the world needs. Yeah. It's like if you hang out with people at the precipice of death, it's really powerful. You see that instead of clinging to the past, they come into alignment with the truth of their present circumstances, and they let go of the fight in a way with life. They understand that much of life is unpredictable, that we have little control. But instead of shrinking in fear from that experience, we step up in a way and meet it with some degree of grace and, I think, courage. And we have the possibility of a different response than just shrinking from life.
Powerful conversation here.
It's really a great conversation.
It's a great conversation.
Thank you for it. It's really great. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. I'll ask you a few last rapid fire questions here. I call it the knowledge round. So are you ready for the knowledge round?
Is there a bell that I can ding?
There is. So you might be wondering, why would I ever invest in a coach? I've never done anything like that before. Well, it's going to shorten your learning curve and save you the time that it would take to achieve your goal. You can avoid making mistakes that you would otherwise make. You'll get more results because everything will be tailored to your specific needs and challenges. The coach will hold you accountable so you can't procrastinate, so you can't be lazy, so you can't say, I didn't have the time. You'll be challenged and pushed harder than you've ever been pushed. You'll have conversations so powerful that you'll feel more energized, alive, and confident and certain about the goals that you have in front of you and where you want to go. Most importantly, where you want to be. You'll go farther than you've ever gone before when you have a coach. If you want to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program, go to kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program. You have got to understand that every successful person in the world invests in coaching to go from good to great. And if you're already a high achiever, then how much more could you achieve if you had a high performance men's coach at your side to push you even further? Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply for our high performance men's coaching program. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. First question I have for you is, what advice would you give to someone who is taking in this information that they want to live now, they want to do it now, but they're not sure what to do with this energy or how to channel it? They're lost. They're lacking a sense of direction in their life.
The first thing I would do is turn toward the obstacle, turn toward the thing that you're afraid of, and I don't mean by to overcome that. I mean, see what you can learn from it, study it. Like you were investing in a great college course. See what it has to show you. Yeah. Go toward the suffering. That's where the healing is always found. That's where the intelligence is found.
What do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
That's a great question. Wow. I think it's that we have it reversed. I think what we need is a strong back and a soft front. And what I mean by that is we need the strength of our back, which is a kind of equanimity for life. And we need an open heart, a compassionate heart, and a heart of altruism. And we have it just reversed. I think we have a very protected, guarded front, thinking that's going to keep out the pain. And sometimes our backs are a bit like jellyfish. And so, we're putting on a good front, but actually we don't feel that strength. So I think that what we really need is a strong back and a soft front. Yeah.
What are 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey, and briefly why?
Wow, that's a really good question. There's so many books that, wow. There's a book by one of my teachers called Suzuki Roshi. He was a Japanese man, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And the name from Where's My Beginner's Mind? It's all about having a beginner's mind. Yeah. So that's a beautiful book. Yeah. There's another book by another Buddhist teacher by the name of Jack Kornfield called A Path with Heart, which I think is terrific. That's a beautiful one that is there. Let's see, what else might I suggest? There's a book by a friend of mine, Joan Halifax, called Being with Dying, which I think is really a great book and talks about kind of some of the things we've been talking about. So, yeah, those are books that come to mind.
Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 30-year-old self, 30-year-old Frank, if you can envision where he's at personally, professionally, in his relationships, knowing what you now know today, what would you tell him to do? What would you tell him not to do?
Great. Well, I would tell him to relax. That mindfulness emerges much more easily in a relaxed mind, heart, and body, Find a balance between relaxation and interest as opposed to energy and, force and absence of energy. Find a balance between relaxation and interest. Yeah. That's a great question.
Great. I love that one. And even if you have to summarize any of your main points that you've shared in today's interview, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
My philosophy, I would say, do not live an unlived life. Don't let your fear keep you from catching fire. Those aren't my words. They came from a woman by the name of Donna Markova. But I think that's really it. Do not live an unlived life. Yeah. Apprentice yourself to the curve of your own disappearance.
Can you say that one more? What was that? What was that?
Apprentice yourself to the curve or the arc of your own disappearance. That's by David White, the poet David White. Apprentice yourself to the curve of your own disappearance. Yeah. So don't think that, death is coming later. Later gives us this comfortable notion that we don't have to deal with it now. Think about, we were talking about this earlier, think about death as endings. This ending, how do you meet this ending? And how does the way that you meet this ending shape the way the next moment begins? Yeah. The way we meet a particular ending has an effect on the way the next thing arises and how we meet that. So pay attention to how you meet endings. Yeah, that's what I mean by apprentice yourself. Learn about how you meet change. Learn about how you meet endings. Yeah.
What would you like the audience to do from here? Is there something that they can do today so they can really kind of get their feet wet?
Yeah. I mean, one, have the conversation. Start having the conversation about dying and not just about how you're going to manage it and get over it, not just physician-assisted death or, how you're going to have the right kind of insurance. Those are important questions to grapple with too. But suppose today was the day of your dying. Is it a good day to die, like the old Native Americans used to say, So have that conversation, let death be your advisor, let it sit there on your left shoulder and help you to see what's most important. Yeah. So I think having the conversation, beginning to just have the conversation with friends, colleagues, family members, etc., not with the idea that you're going to get the right answer, right, but to begin to explore how you think and feel about this experience.
Very good.
And the last one, of course, tell the people you love that you love them.
Yeah.
Don't wait.
Do you think death, or at least an understanding of death, should be taught in schools, maybe high school?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it should be taught in grade school. I think it should be taught in kindergarten. I used to run, when my son was really little, I had a preschool that I did with a friend of mine, and we used to have these days where we'd say, let's find dead stuff. And we'd take these 5-year-old kids out into the woods, and they'd find dead stuff. And we'd bring it back and spread it all out on a blue tarp. And, they'd find a dead leaf or a piece of a branch or an old car part or bones of a bird or something like that. And they would sit around and they'd talk about it. And the kids weren't afraid at all. And they had great stories. They see this old car part and say that it fell off a spaceship that was flying over. They'd see a piece of bark and say it had been a bed for a mouse. This one little girl said to me, I think the leaves that fall from the trees are very generous. If they didn't fall, there would be no room for new leaves. So I thought that was really sweet and insightful also, So I think, yes, talk to kids about this from very early on. And, depending on the age of our development, we're going to have different appreciations and understanding about it. But yeah, absolutely.
Great. Great.
The kids just want to know what's real. They want to know, you don't need to protect them in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. They're very curious. Well, for all the listeners, we covered most of the 5 invitations, but please check out the book, The 5 Invitations. You can go to Amazon, just type in 5 invitations. It pops right up. The subtitle, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. I highly recommend it. The reviews look fantastic, hundreds. So check out his work. And also the website, we have 5invitations.com, where you can learn more about events and courses and future work too of Frank. Frank, thank you so much for coming here on the show and being vulnerable. And, this is such a powerful topic. I was so excited to dive in with you here today.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you had the courage, actually, to approach this topic. I mean, the whole world is running in the other direction, away from this topic, and you had the courage to turn toward it. And I really want to applaud you for doing that and say what a service it was to your listeners that you did that. And so thanks for doing it. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.